Scary telling.
I'm Sophie Johnson, and I live in a small apartment with my family. It's not much, but it's home. We produce a lot of garbage, and I'm responsible for taking it out to the bins behind the building. I've never been a fan of this chore, but lately, it's become downright terrifying. It all started a few weeks ago. I was taking out the trash when I heard a strange noise coming from one of the bins. It was like a scratching or scurrying sound. I froze, unsure of what to do. I considered running back inside and telling my parents, but I knew they would just tell me to stop being so silly and take out the garbage. I mustered up my courage and approached the bin, peering inside. At first, I didn't see anything out of the ordinary. But then, something moved, and I jumped back, my heart racing. I couldn't make out what it was, but it looked like some kind of animal. From that point on, I became obsessed with the creatures in the bins. Every time I had to take out the garbage, my heart would race, and my palms would sweat. I started avoiding the task altogether, coming up with excuses and trying to get my little brother to do it instead. But my family wasn't having it. They accused me of being lazy and unhelpful, and they insisted that I take out the garbage like everyone else. They didn't understand the terror that I felt every time I had to do it. As the days went on, I started hearing more and more noises coming from the bins. Sometimes it was just a rustling or scratching sound, but other times it sounded like something was growling or snarling. I knew that whatever was in there wasn't just a harmless little critter. I tried to tell my family what was going on, but they didn't believe me. They thought I was just trying to get out of my chores, or that I was imagining things. But I knew that what I was hearing was real. My fear of the creatures in the bins began to consume me. I couldn't sleep at night, always listening for the telltale sounds of their movement. I started having nightmares about being attacked by them, and I woke up in a cold sweat, convinced that they were lurking just outside my door. I knew that I had to do something, but I didn't know what. I couldn't just ignore the creatures in the bins and hope that they would go away. But I also couldn't face them alone. I needed help, but I didn't know where to turn. As the days went on, my fear only grew. The creatures in the bins had taken over my life, and I didn't know how to make it stop. I knew that I had to do something, but I didn't know what. The strange occurrences in my apartment only got worse as the days went on. The noises coming from the bins grew louder and more persistent, and I started to find small animal carcasses scattered around the kitchen floor. I tried to tell my family about what was happening, but they still didn't believe me. They thought that I was overreacting and that the carcasses were just a result of normal urban wildlife activity. But I knew that it was more than that. I could feel it. My fear grew into a kind of obsession. I spent all of my time researching different kinds of animals that could be living in the bins, trying to find any clue that could help me understand what was happening. I even started staking out the bins, waiting for something to emerge. One night, I was sitting in the living room when I heard a loud scratching noise coming from the kitchen. I jumped up and rushed over to investigate. When I got there, I found a trail of claw marks leading from the trash cans to the door. I followed the trail out onto the back patio, where I found a small raccoon hiding behind one of the planters. Its eyes glinted in the darkness, and I could see that it was covered in scratches and bite marks. The sight of the injured raccoon filled me with a strange sense of empathy. I knew that it was just trying to survive, like me. But at the same time, I couldn't shake the feeling that something darker and more sinister was going on. Over the next few days, I continued to find animal carcasses in the kitchen. Sometimes it was just a few scraps of fur or a scattering of bones, but other times it was a whole body, mutilated and torn apart. My family started to get worried, but they still didn't believe me when I told them that something was living in the bins. They thought that I was just having nightmares and that my fear was getting the best of me. But I knew that it was more than that. I could feel it in my bones. There was something in those bins, something that was feeding on the animals and growing stronger by the day. As the days went on, my fear turned to desperation. I knew that I had to find a way to make my family understand what was happening, but I didn't know how. I was trapped in a nightmare of my own making, and I didn't know how to wake up. My obsession with the creatures in the bins had reached its peak. I was spending all of my free time researching animals and trying to find any information that could help me make sense of what was happening. One day, I stumbled upon an article about a rare species of rat that was known to live in urban areas and feed on garbage. The article described the rats as vicious predators that would attack anything that came near their territory. The more I read, the more convinced I became that these were the creatures living in the bins. It all made sense: the scratching, the growling, the animal carcasses. It was all the work of these vicious rats. I decided that I needed to confront my family with the truth. I printed out the article and presented it to them, along with the evidence I had collected: the carcasses, the claw marks, the sounds coming from the bins. At first, they were skeptical. But as I laid out the evidence before them, they began to realize that I might be onto something. They agreed to help me investigate further, and we spent the next few nights staking out the bins, waiting for the creatures to emerge. Finally, one night, we saw them. A group of rats emerged from the bins, snarling and growling as they scurried across the pavement. We watched in horror as they attacked a stray cat, tearing it apart with their sharp teeth and claws. My family was finally convinced that something was living in the bins, and they agreed to help me get rid of it. We called in an exterminator and set traps around the bins, hoping to catch the creatures. But as the days went on, it became clear that these were no ordinary rats. They were smart, cunning, and vicious, and they seemed to be able to evade our traps and escape unharmed. I knew that we needed to do something more drastic. We needed to get to the source of the problem, to find out where the rats were coming from and cut them off at the root. It was a risky plan, but I was willing to do whatever it took to get rid of the creatures in the bins. I knew that if we didn't act soon, they would only grow stronger and more dangerous. So, with my family's reluctant support, I set out on a dangerous mission to discover the truth about the creatures in the bins. My plan to get rid of the creatures in the bins was risky, but I knew that it was our only chance. I set out on a dangerous mission to discover the truth about the creatures, determined to find the source of the problem and cut it off at the root. I started by staking out the bins, watching and waiting for any sign of movement. I didn't have to wait long. As the sun set and the moon rose, I saw movement coming from the bins. A horde of rats emerged, their eyes glinting in the darkness as they snarled and growled at each other. I watched as they scurried across the pavement, heading towards the nearby park. I followed them, staying a safe distance behind as they disappeared into the underbrush. What I found there was beyond anything I could have imagined. The rats had built a massive colony in the park, using discarded trash to create a sprawling network of tunnels and nests. And at the center of it all was their queen, a massive rat with eyes like black pits and teeth like razors. I knew that I had to act fast. The queen rat was the key to getting rid of the creatures in the bins. If I could take her out, the rest of the colony would crumble. But the queen rat was a formidable opponent. She was massive, with razor-sharp claws and teeth that glinted in the moonlight. And she wasn't alone. Dozens of rats swarmed around her, snarling and hissing as they guarded their queen. I knew that I couldn't take them all alone. I called my family and told them to meet me in the park, bringing anything they could find that might help. We armed ourselves with sticks, rocks, and anything else we could find, preparing for the fight of our lives. The battle was fierce and terrifying. The rats swarmed us from all sides, their sharp claws and teeth tearing our flesh. We fought back with all of our strength, but it seemed like there were too many of them. Just when I thought all was lost, I saw something amazing. One of the rats, a small one with a white stripe down its back, stepped forward and started fighting on our side. It was like it knew what we were trying to do and was willing to help us. With the help of the white striped rat, we were able to finally defeat the queen rat and destroy the colony. The creatures in the bins were finally gone, and I felt a sense of relief wash over me. But the victory was bittersweet. I had lost so much in the fight: my family, my sense of safety, and my sanity. The creatures in the bins had taken over my life, and it would take a long time to recover from the trauma. As we limped back to our apartment, bloody and bruised but victorious, I knew that we would never forget the horrors that we had faced. The creatures in the bins had changed us forever, and we would carry the scars of that night with us for the rest of our lives. In the aftermath of the night of terror, my family and I were left to pick up the pieces of our shattered lives. We had defeated the creatures in the bins, but the cost had been high. We were battered and bruised, physically and emotionally, and we needed time to heal. The first few weeks were the hardest. We were all on edge, jumping at every sound and constantly looking over our shoulders. The trauma of the night of terror had left us all with a deep sense of fear and anxiety. But slowly, over time, we began to heal. We talked about what had happened, sharing our stories and our fears. We sought therapy and support, learning how to cope with the trauma and move forward. As we worked through our feelings, we began to realize that the creatures in the bins had been a symptom of a larger problem. We had been living in a state of constant stress and anxiety, struggling to make ends meet and keep up with the demands of daily life. We knew that we needed to make changes, to find a way to live that didn't revolve around fear and stress. And so we began to make small changes, cutting back on unnecessary expenses and working to build a more sustainable life. It wasn't easy, but over time, we began to see the benefits. We started to feel more in control of our lives, more confident and empowered. We found joy in simple things, like cooking meals together and spending time in nature. As we moved forward, we never forgot the lessons that we had learned from the creatures in the bins. We knew that we could never take our safety and security for granted, and we were determined to live our lives to the fullest, no matter what challenges we might face. Looking back, I can hardly believe that we made it through those dark days. But we did, and we emerged stronger and more resilient than ever before. And though the memories of the creatures in the bins will always haunt us, they will also remind us of our strength and our ability to overcome even the greatest challenges.